Good evening and shalom. Welcome to this episode here of the Watchdog. We are here with you on May the 29th, 2019. It's a Wednesday, and we do have some very interesting things to be talking about here today. So we do have some new news, obviously. This is, news is what we're talking about, so we're obviously going to have some things that are new. It's been a week since you guys have seen me, right? So obviously, got to have some, information that isn't just repeats, but we are going to be doing some repeats. And what I mean by that is, I haven't gotten too deep into this abortion issue. I've obviously referenced it a few times in some of these videos, but we haven't actually gone in depth as to what my opinions are, what the law actually says, and just basically what I think the future of this debate is going to be, not only in the micro on state levels like in Alabama, here in Idaho, etc., but also on the macro, right, when we're discussing this on the national scale and national politics for senatorial seats or the presidential elections, right, or even the possibility of challenging Roe v. Wade and getting justices on the courts and things like that. So we'll be going into all of that. We'll also be discussing some things that were on the most recent Watchdog, just basically because we didn't get to kind of articulate that clearly. Not that the video itself was bad originally, but apparently there was an overlaying of the recordings. I guess when you record the screen, I am technologically illiterate practically, so I didn't know this, but I guess when you record the screen, even if you have the volume turned all the way down, it does still actually pick up the videos if they're playing. I didn't realize the videos were playing because the volume was down, but I guess the system actually does pick that up. Kind of cool, but at the same time, kind of ruined the video. So we'll be discussing some things that we had on there too. And then, of course, as is tradition, we gotta reference something that Francis is doing, because the Grand Blasphemous is always up to his Grand Blasphemous-ing, right? It's the main reason why this program exists in the first place. We're the Watchdog. What are we watching? Well, the Vatican, really. It's also the United Nations and also Washington, D.C., and also things like that. But for the most part, I think you guys have kind of gotten the idea. It's mainly the Vatican. I don't trust them, right? I think that, well, we'll get into that later on. There's no point in getting into a rant on it now. Let's just go right into some of the stuff I want to talk about before we actually get into the abortion ban itself. We're going to talk about some ironies in regards to the abortion ban. First irony is the adoption irony. Alabama sets adoption record amid abortion debate. This is by Caleb Park from Fox News, as you can clearly see. This lovely lady here is Governor Ivey, Kay Ivey, a Republican from Alabama, who decided that, guess what? It's not a women's issue. It doesn't really matter if you're a woman or a man. Murdering babies is wrong. So go ahead and sign that. See there, we just heard something from somewhere. Alright, I guess it's off. Sorry about that. Anyways, Alabama's adoption record is getting attention after the southern state passed the most restrictive abortion ban in the country. After Republican Governor Kay Ivey, signed a law that made performing an abortion after 6 weeks a felony unless it was necessary for the health of the mother, the law immediately came under fire. Disregard the Jim Carrey stuff. Nobody cares about that. Anti-Trump celebrity Chelsea Handler slammed the law in a post. Notice that is like what we're at in this society now, right? That it's anti-Trump celebrity Chelsea Handler. Why is she the one that we care about? Why is Alyssa Milano the one that we care? I just think it's ridiculous. Like, no disrespect to anybody, cough, cough, Trump, but you've kind of gotten us to a point where, actually, it really starts with Schwarzenegger, but even still, why do celebrities feel like I or anyone else wants to listen to their garbage opinions on politics? Nobody cares about your garbage opinion on politics, except for other people who tend to have very garbage opinions on politics and actually don't vote because they're like 12. But, nonetheless, anti-Trump celebrity Chelsea Handler slammed a law in a post that said, quote, protecting the unborn, yet having no regard for the children in the country. Notice she acknowledges it's protecting the unborn. Protecting the unborn, yet having no regard for the children in this country who are actually alive. If you're not doing something, you're doing nothing. Now is the time to get involved, end quote. So, I guess protecting the unborn to her is just not something that's important, because she acknowledges that that's what this bill is, which I do have to give her a little bit of credit in this regard, because a lot of pro-deathers actually like to say that it's just a matter of, controlling the woman's body and things like that. That's not the case. In fact, as we've seen here in Alabama, the one who proposed the bill originally and the governor who signed the bill into law were both women. So clearly, this is not something that is, a gendered issue. I think it's 49 or 50% It's either just under 50, which would be obviously like something like 49, or 50% of women are pro-life, right? So clearly, this is not a gendered issue. Left likes to think it is. Okay, I mean, if you can present some kind of evidence of that, but when you're telling me that it's something about, it's just a bunch of men trying to get together to oppress women, to make sure we're controlling their bodies and things like that, that's just a lie. And I think you know that that's a lie, especially if you've actually been listening to the pro-life arguments for any amount of time. The bill, which closely resembles the heartbeat abortion laws passed in several other states, was quickly... I cannot talk right now. I'm going to restart that sentence. The bill, which closely resembles the heartbeat abortion laws passed in several other states, was quickly criticized for protecting children in the womb by not doing anything for them once they are born. So, we need to quickly address this absolutely nonsensical argument because it's quite frankly ridiculous on numerous accounts. Okay? Point number one. Imagine somebody telling you, I'm going to slaughter all of the homeless people in the world. And you say, hey man, that's real messed up. You shouldn't kill homeless people. They're people too. And that person comes back to you, oh yeah? Well, are you going to feed and clothe them? Does that sound like a reasonable argument to you, or does it sound like the justifications of a sociopath? Because it sounds more like the latter to me. Personally, and I know this is going out on a limb, but I think that you should not be required to care for every aspect of a human being's life in order to think that you shouldn't be able to take that life away from him or her without some sort of a justification. Which, by the way, the only justifications to take life, in my opinion, are a war, and it's got to be a justified war. That's in the political scale. There's all the discussion about that, but in war and conflict, right, or in the death penalty, that's it, right? Other than that, there is no legal justification. There is no moral justification whatsoever to take a human life, in my own opinion. Okay. So that's just point number one, right? We just wanted to add to that, but you get the idea, right? If somebody were to say, well, I'm going to kill all the homeless, and you said, well, yeah, right, exactly, right? I'm not going to repeat it. Point number two, though. Guess who the most likely demographic to oppose abortion is? White, 30 to 50-year-old male Christians. That is the highest demographic. Now, of course, as we already discussed, roughly 50% of all women actually do also support pro-life positions, right? But if we're talking about what the largest individual demographic is, it tends to be married, white, young but not too young males who are religious. You'll never guess what the most likely demographic to adopt children is. It just so happens to be males who are married, who are white, who are between the ages of 30 and 50, and religious, right? And this is actually a very well-known fact. In fact, one of the things that has become so well-known that it's actually a common movie and television trope at this point is the idea that churches open orphanages and adoption centers, right? It's Saint something or Sister something something or whatever, right? Now, granted, obviously, most of these tend to be Catholic in the movies and TVs, whereas they're not universally so in real life. You have Mormon ones and Christian ones, etc. The point is, they are pro-life people, and yet they're the ones who are going out of their way to help children. And now, I know all the jokes coming about, yeah, well, Catholics touch children, all the things. Well, the institution certainly has a problem with that. You're not going to find me defending the Catholic Church in any way, shape, or form. But let's be perfectly clear, the vast majority of people who are just going and working at their local orphanage are not pedophiles, right? I think we can all agree to that, regardless of if they're Catholic or not. So this is not something that is our problem in the sense of that the pro-life side is not going out of its way to care for children in adoption centers. The pro-life side is the one that gets the most children adopted, that actually fosters children, that actually opens orphanages, that actually contributes to charity. There's actually tons of studies out there that say that wealthier, conservative people and religious people, those three demographics, conservative, wealthy, and religious, tend to be the ones who give in charity the most. And by the way, that was $390.5 billion total from the United States in 2017. I don't know what the numbers for 2018 were because I haven't seen them yet. However, that's a lot of money in charity. It's not like people are being stingy with their money in this regard. Unless, of course, you're talking about people on the left. So, not only is it completely ridiculous logic, because once again, of course, if somebody said, I'm going to kill all the homeless people unless you personally care for them, that'd be ridiculous. It's not my job to care for them, but just because I'm not caring for them doesn't mean you get to kill them. But also, it's actually just a complete straw man, because the people who support pro-life positions are the same people who are adopting children and taking care of children who are homeless and etc., giving to charity and etc., right? And that's part of what we're actually seeing here with this article. Let's continue. But pro-life activists are pointing to Alabama's adoption record to show the state does care about the well-being of its children. Alabama recently set a new record for its work in foster care adoptions. Quote, it sends a strong, wonderful message to all the foster care children in our state, end quote. Ivy said when she announced the accomplishment last year, AL.com reports, which is Alabama.com. Quote, but those that don't, they need their own loving, caring, permanent family, and that's what it's all about, end quote. She explained, saying the uptake could be due to help from juvenile courts, judges, and the DHR. We can continue on this. Obviously, it's a very good point. I have a lot of articles I want to get to, so I don't want to go into this too much, but it's just a very, very prominent example of the irony in this debate when people say, oh, well, you don't care about the living children. Actually, people on this side are the ones who are more likely to give to charity, are the ones who are more likely to adopt children, are the ones who are more likely to foster children, to open orphanages, to go feed the homeless, etc., right? You can go on. It doesn't matter if it's rape victims or veterans of the Iraq War or everything in between, right? It's always conservatives who are more likely to support legislation against this, to support actually helping these people with both physical labor and monetary giving, right? And giving of food and stuff like that, right? Values, sorry. And by the way, little interesting and fun fact for you, this does apply almost universally. Georgia, of course, is the other one that is being kind of just ransacked by the media for its abortion law, right? Recently saying that you can't abort a fetus, I think after 8 weeks it was. And Georgia is the one that went to the Supreme Court in Coker versus Georgia in 1977 for the right to execute rapists. Which, by the way, all the same members of the 1973 decision in Roe v. Wade happened to vote for the majority decision in Coker versus Georgia, which said you can't execute rapists because it's not, it basically fits under the cruel and unusual clause, according to that Supreme Court. I would really like to know why. I mean, if we, maybe we should get a legal definition of what a heinous crime is. But I'm pretty sure if we did, and a heinous crime being some kind of crime that does deserve the death penalty, right? I'm pretty sure if we did, rape would be included on there. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. And by the way, even though this wasn't the same members of the court, it was another conservative state, Louisiana, that ended up being forced to say you can't execute pedophiles in 2008. I don't remember. I think it was 2008. It was Louisiana versus someone. I'm not as familiar with that case, but they wanted to execute a pedophile. Sorry, can't do that because the liberal Supreme Court justices said so. The conservatives, the ones who are giving all that money to charity and adopting children and etc., the ones who are passing these pro-life bills, they also happen to be the ones who are saying, hey, maybe it's not okay to have pedophiles and rapists running around. Maybe we should punish them severely to the harshest extent of the law. So when people want to tell you, oh, such and such a person doesn't care about children or women because he supports the pro-life position, just go ahead and throw those statistics in their face. Go ahead and throw those facts about Coker versus Georgia and Roe v. Wade and how the only member. This is another really fun fact. There's two guys on each in each ruling, right, who were against the majority, who were dissenting, right, as they say. And interestingly enough, one of those guys, I can't remember his name at the moment, but actually is a dissenter on both Roe v. Wade and Coker versus Georgia. And he was known as the constitutional originalist as well. So, I mean, is that coincidental? I really don't think so. But nonetheless, let's go into this a little bit further. And by further, I mean, let's actually read to you the Alabama abortion law. This is Alabama.com. Alabama abortion law passes. Read the bill. So, this was done by Lita, I think. Liata? I'm not sure how you would say that. Sorry. Lita Gore. I'm going to go with Lita. Lita Gore. Alabama abortion ban, read the bill. Alabama lawmakers have passed a bill that would make it a felony for doctors to perform or attempt to perform an abortion in the state. The controversial bill contains no exceptions for victims of rape or incest, but does allow for abortions in cases where the mother's life is at risk. Here is the text of the bill. And by the way, just something we need to note here. Notice how it says perform or attempt to perform an abortion for doctors, right? Notice it does not say punish women who get an abortion. Okay, because this is a common lie that you're being told by members of the leftist media, saying that they're going after women who are getting abortions. That is not the case. Okay, the Alabama and Georgia laws do not, or any of the other laws, by the way, because there's also laws like this being suggested in North Carolina, Ohio. Some of them have passed, some of them have not. Numerous other states besides that. They are going after doctors. They are not going after mothers in any of these cases. Not a single one of the bills. Okay. Nonetheless, though, let's continue. This bill would make abortion and attempted abortion felony offenses except in cases where abortion is necessary in order to prevent a serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. The bill would provide that a woman who receives an abortion will not be held criminally culpable or civilly liable for receiving the abortion. Okay, so just point that out whenever they say we're going to go after women, whenever they say we have harsher punishments for rapists, or for women who get abortions rather than we do for rapists, that is a lie. The bill would provide that a woman who receives an abortion will not be held criminally culpable or civilly liable for receiving the abortion. That is what the bill says. Amendment 621 of the Constitution of Alabama of 1901, now appearing as Section 111.05 of the official recompilation of the Constitution of Alabama of 1901, as amended, prohibits a general law whose purpose or effect would be to require a new or increased expenditure of local funds from becoming effective with regard to a local government entity without enactment by a 2/3 vote, unless it comes within one of a number of specified exceptions. It is approved by the affected entity, or the legislature appropriate. Let me restart that. I messed that up. Or the legislature appropriates funds or provides a local source of revenue to the entity for the purpose. So to say again, the specified exceptions are if it is approved by the affected entity, or the legislature appropriates funds or provides a local source of revenue to the entity for the purpose. The purpose or effect of this bill would be to require a new or increased expenditure of local funds within the meaning of the amendment. However, the bill does not require an approval of a local government entity or enactment by a 2/3 vote to become effective because it comes within one of the specified exceptions contained in the amendment. Oh, sorry. Went a little bit too far there. Be it enacted by the legislature of Alabama. Section 1. This act shall be known as the Alabama Human Life Protection Act. Section 2. Legislative findings. The state statute criminalizing abortion, Section 13A-13-7 Code of Alabama 1975, has never been repealed. This is a fact. It has remained unenforceable as a result of the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade 410 U.S. 113 in 1973 and its progeny, which struck down as unconstitutional a Texas statute criminalizing abortion and which effectively repealed by implication and made unenforceable all other state statutes criminalizing abortion. On November 6, 2018, electors in this state approved by a majority vote a constitutional amendment to the Constitution of Alabama 1901, declaring and affirming the public policy of the state to recognize and support the sanctity of unborn life and the rights of unborn children. The amendment made it clear that the Constitution of Alabama 1901 does not include a right to an abortion or require the funding of abortions using public funds. In present state law, Section 13A-6-1 Code of Alabama 1975 defines a person for homicide purposes to include an unborn child in utero at any stage of development, regardless of viability. In the United States Declaration of Independence, the principles of natural law that, quote, all men are created equal, end quote, was articulated. The self-evident truth found in natural law that all human beings are equal from creation was at least one of the bases for the anti-slavery movement, the women's suffrage movement, the Nuremberg war crimes trials, and the American civil rights movement. If those movements had not been able to appeal to the truth of universal human equality, they could not have been successful. Of course, Alabama is very familiar with a few of those, specifically the anti-slavery, and Martin Luther King was actually from Alabama, right? So the civil rights law, or civil rights movements, rather. Abortion advocates speak to women's rights, but they ignore the unborn child, while medical science has increasingly recognized the humanity of the unborn child. This is true. We have EEGs by 8 weeks. We have heartbeats by 6 weeks, right? So if you're going to say brain dead is, or brain wave, activity, I guess, the act of not being brain dead, or the state of not being brain dead, rather. If you're going to say that is what constitutes life, it's bare minimum 8 weeks. If you're going to say it's the heartbeat, it's 6, right? Recent medical advances prove a baby's heart starts to beat at around 6 weeks. At about 8 weeks, the heartbeat can be heard through an ultrasound examination. A fetal Doppler can detect a fetal heartbeat as early as 10 weeks. Ultrasound imaging shows the developing child in utero. As early as 6 weeks after fertilization, fetal photography shows the clear development of a human being. The Alabama Department of Public Health publications, quote, "Did you know," end quote, or I think it's called "Did you know," sorry, demonstrates through actual pictures at 2-week intervals throughout the entire pregnancy the clear images of a developing human being. It is estimated that 6 million Jewish people were murdered in German concentration camps during World War II. 3 million were executed by Joseph Stalin's regime in Soviet gulags. 2.5 million were murdered during the Chinese Great Leap Forward. In 1958, 1.5 million to 3 million people were murdered by the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia during the 1970s, and approximately 1 million people were murdered during the Rwandan genocide in 1994. All of these are widely acknowledged to have been crimes against humanity, but by comparison, more than 50 million babies have been aborted in the United States since the Roe decision in 1973, more than 3 times the number who were killed in German death camps, Chinese purges, Stalin's gulags, Cambodian killing fields, and the Rwandan genocide combined. I do have to correct the record here for a minute, because I'm sure they're using specific examples, however, or specific groups in these examples. However, if we actually take the total numbers, it's somewhere between 11 and 17 million total. 6 million are Jewish, between 5.1 and 6 million are Jewish, but it's 11 to 17 million total for Hitler. The lowest I've ever seen for Stalin is around 20 million. The highest is 34. I have seen people say Mao Zedong, who had the Great Leap Forward, ended up in total killing upwards of 78 million people. Other people have said as low as 40 million people, but nonetheless. The Khmer Rouge is accurate, but that was an entire 25% of Cambodia. So there is also that. Likewise, when he says more than 50 million, the specific numbers I have heard are 59 million, 62 million, 64 million, and 71 million. Which one of those is true, I'm not sure, but nonetheless, that would be more than these numbers combined, but these numbers are kind of specific. You're taking just the Great Leap Forward, you're just taking some of the gulags, just taking the Jewish population, etc. Just want to point that out for the sake of honesty. The cases of Roe v. Wade and its progeny have engendered much civil litigation and legislative attempts to rein in so-called abortion rights. Roe v. Wade attempted to define when abortion of an unborn child could be legal. Judges and legal scholars have disagreed and dissented with its findings. Section 3, as used in this act, the following terms shall be the following meanings, or shall have the following meanings, sorry. Number 1, abortion. The use or prescription of any instrument, medicine, drug, or any other substance or device with the intent to terminate the pregnancy of a woman known to be pregnant with the knowledge that the termination by those means will with reasonable likelihood cause the death of the unborn child. The term does not include these activities if done with the intent to save the life or preserve the health of an unborn child, remove a dead unborn child, to deliver the unborn child prematurely to avoid serious health risk to the unborn child's mother, or to preserve the health of the unborn child. The term does not include a procedure or act to terminate the pregnancy of a woman with an ectopic pregnancy, nor does it include the procedure to act to terminate the pregnancy of a woman when the unborn child has a lethal anomaly. Number 2, ectopic pregnancy. Any pregnancy resulting from either a fertilized egg that has implanted or attached outside the uterus, or a fertilized egg implanted inside the cornu of the uterus. Excuse me. If I'm pronouncing any of these incorrectly, please forgive me. I am not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination. Lethal anomaly. Number 3, lethal anomaly. A condition from which an unborn child would die after birth or shortly thereafter or be stillborn. Number 4, medical emergency. A condition which, in reasonable medical judgment, so complicates the medical condition of the pregnant woman that her pregnancy must be terminated to avoid a serious health risk as defined in this act. Number 5, physician. A person licensed to practice medicine and surgery or osteopathic medicine and surgery in Alabama. Medicine and surgery in Alabama, sorry. Number 6, serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. In reasonable medical judgment, the child's mother has a condition that so complicates her medical condition. I kind of got mixed up there. The child's mother has a condition that so complicates her medical condition that it necessitates the termination of her pregnancy to avert her death or to avert serious risk of substantial physical impairment of a major bodily function. This term does not include a condition based on a claim that the woman is suffering from an emotional condition or a mental illness which will cause her to engage in conduct that intends to result in her death or the death of her unborn child. However, the condition may exist if a second physician who is licensed in Alabama as a psychiatrist with a minimum of 3 years of clinical experience examines the woman and documents that the woman has a diagnosed serious mental issue, and because of it, there is reasonable medical judgment that she will engage in conduct that could result in her death in the death of her child. I did get it right the first time. In her death or the death of her unborn child. If the mental health diagnosis and likelihood of conduct is confirmed as provided in this act, and it is determined that the termination of her pregnancy is medically necessary to avoid the conduct, the termination may be performed and shall be only performed by a physician licensed in Alabama in a hospital as defined in the Alabama Administrative Code and to which he or she has admitting privileges. Now, briefly, I want to state here, because we're actually getting to a point where I kind of disagree. You have a lot of people talking about how this law is too harsh. I honestly don't think it's harsh enough in a lot of instances. I don't think you being a schizophrenic person or being depressed or something along those lines is legal justification to have an abortion. I think it's completely ridiculous. And quite frankly, even though this bill does not, I would definitely try to punish women who got legal abortions. Just like I would punish mothers who murdered their toddlers, I would do the same for those who murdered their fetuses, right? Just the stage in development does not devalue the life, in my opinion. But nonetheless. Number 7, unborn child, or person. A human being, specifically including an unborn child in utero at any stage of development, regardless of viability. Excuse me. Number 8, woman. A female human being, whether or not she has reached the age of majority, which is the age of puberty, somewhere between the ages of 12 and 15. Section 4A, it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally perform or attempt to perform an abortion except as provided for by subsection B. B, an abortion shall be permitted if an attending physician licensed in Alabama determines that an abortion is necessary in order to prevent a serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. Except in the case of a medical emergency as defined herein, the physician's determination shall be confirmed in writing by a second physician licensed in the state of Alabama. The confirmation shall occur within 180 days after the abortion is completed and shall be prima facie, I'm not sure how you say that. I know the first one is prima, I think the second one is facie. But nonetheless, once again, not a lawyer, right? Do apologize. I'll get better at this as time goes on as I'm saying these words more and more, but if you want to go ahead and, trash me in the comments, it kind of opened it up, so definitely do so. Evidence for a permitted abortion, Section 5, no woman upon whom an abortion is performed or attempted to be performed shall be criminally or civilly liable. Once again, I personally disagree. However, this is what the Alabama law says. So if anybody tells you this isn't what the Alabama law says, you need to tell them that they are wrong. And, maybe, I don't know, you could make an argument for the perform, I would say at least an accessory to murder. But if you're performing it yourself, like the whole coat hanger abortion thing, then yeah, I think you should definitely be liable legally. And criminally, by the way, not just civilly. Furthermore, no physician confirming the serious health risk to the child's mother shall be criminally or civilly liable for those actions. Section 6A, an abortion performed in violation of this act is a Class A felony, as it should be. Section B, an attempted abortion performed in violation of this act is a Class C felony. Section 7, this act shall not apply to a physician licensed in Alabama performing a termination of a pregnancy or assisting in performing a termination of a pregnancy due to a medical emergency as defined by this act. Section 8, the construction of existing statutes and regulations that regulate or recognize abortion in Alabama that are in conflict with or antagonistic to this act shall be repealed as null and void and shall recognize the prohibition of abortion as provided in this act. If this act is challenged and enjoined pending a final judicial decision, the existing statutes and regulations that regulate or recognize abortion shall remain in effect during that time. Section 9. Although this bill would have its purpose or effect the requirement of a new or increased expenditure of local funds, Although this bill would have as its purpose or effect the requirement of a new or increased expenditure of local funds, the bill is excluded from further requirements and application under Amendment 621, now appearing as Section 111-05 of the official recompilation of the Constitution of Alabama of 1901 as amended, because the bill defines a new crime or amends the definition of an existing crime. Section 10, this shall become effective 6 months following its passage and approval by the governor, or its otherwise becoming law. That is the entire bill, beginning to end. So, let's talk about it. Thing number one, I do love the bill. I really do. I mean, all things considered, I talk about how I disagree with a few parts of it, and we'll get into that in a second. But I do, all things considered, love the bill, because this, in my opinion, is one of the greatest evils actually going on in the United States of America at this point in time. Somewhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million babies are aborted every single year. And that is completely absurd for people to think that that is morally justifiable, especially when you consider the fact that by the admission of pro-death groups like Planned Parenthood, 99.16% of all abortions are actually done for reasons that are not under the age of 15, not incest related, not rape related, not threat to the mother's life related, right? 99.16% are for reasons of birth control, convenience, and that is disgusting. And if you support that, I'm sorry, but you need to seriously morally check yourself, because the thing which you are supporting right now is disgusting. It's morally abominable. Now, does that make you a morally abominable person? No. Plenty of people have supported morally abominable positions. I'm just simply saying there needs to be some very serious moral questioning in you, to you personally, if you think that 99.16% of 900,000 at the lowest babies aborted every single year is justified because it inconveniences the mother, right? People need to be responsible for their own decisions. And quite frankly, if you decide you are going to have sex with somebody, every single time that you decide that you are going to have sex with somebody, you have made the decision that you will care for that child if it happens to go down that way, right? Now you can try to prepare against that, of course, with vasectomies, with tube ties, with getting condoms, with getting birth control, all that other kind of stuff, right? That's well within your rights, right? But if we are just talking from an ethical, moral standpoint, if you are grown enough to get into the bed with another human being and potentially cause the life of another person to come into being, then you are grown enough to take care of that other child, of that other human, right? That's just the facts as far as I'm concerned. There is no disputing that as far as I'm concerned. I think if we are disputing this, don't get me wrong, we certainly can. I'm open to dialogue. But I do think there's a fundamental, foundational problem here, right? That we will never agree on. Because what we are disagreeing on is what the value of human life actually is. And that is one of the core foundations of somebody's moral worldview. I think you would all agree, right? If you don't think a human life, and by the way, in the future, let me be perfectly clear, okay, for the pro-death crowd, it will quickly become obvious just how pro-death they are. We've already seen them openly acknowledge the fact that they would be killing babies who were born and now viable outside of the womb because of a failed abortion or a botched abortion of some kind, right? But how long is it until they start euthanizing people who are too old? Or euthanizing people in adoption centers like they do dogs? Which PETA does, by the way, not some conservative group, just for the record. How long until they decide it's okay to start euthanizing the mentally handicapped or physically handicapped? I mean, hell, in 1924, I believe it was, the Supreme Court already said it was cool. Because, the Supreme Court is apparently God in this country for some reason. I mean, how long? How long are you honestly going to give it? Everybody says that, the slippery slope doesn't exist, but every single time somebody has said how long until such and such an event has happened, that event has happened. We do have people talking about killing babies outside of the womb now. We do have people saying abortion free and on demand all the way up until birth, right? That is something people are, and to move on to other things, right? People have been talking about legalizing pedophilia, legalizing incest and polygamy and things like that, right? So these slippery slopes, people talk about legalizing drugs and stuff like that. By the way, I just want to make perfectly clear, you can support whatever you want to support on those issues. Just note that the slippery slope argument applies always. It is the natural progression of human thought to go to the logical extreme. It's just a fact. It's the way we operate as a species. It's actually one of the great things about a republic is you get the two kind of fighting with each other. Sometimes, unfortunately, there is a solidly correct side, right? But usually you have the two pulling forth on each other and nobody ever gets to go to the logical extreme because there's always the other side. Nonetheless. So love the bill. I do have my problems with the bill. Problem number one, I don't think women who get abortions should be exempt. And I know that that is a harsh thing, and I know that people out there are going to continuously come at me and say, how could you possibly advocate something like that? But let me ask you, what other group of people is exempt from murdering children? Obviously, the answer is none. There is none. Not a racial group, not a religious group, not a group of mental cognition, not a class. Nobody is legally allowed to take the life of another human being except for women. Why is that? That makes absolutely no sense. If we're being morally, and you want to say, well, the abortion doctor is the one who actually metaphorically pulls the trigger, right? He's the one who performs the abortion. All right, accessory to murder. Bare minimum. Manslaughter, something like that, right? Bare minimum. I mean, I don't understand why that is a controversial thing to say. Again, if somebody were to say to a doctor, you can euthanize my 3-year-old because I don't have enough money to take care of him and I'm mentally ill because I'm a schizophrenic person and also we're very poor, so he's going to have a terrible life anyways. I kind of already said that, but whatever. You know what I mean, etc. Then I would imprison the doctor for euthanizing the child, and then, shocking, I know, I would also imprison the mother as an accessory to murder, because that's what she just did. I'd also probably hit her with a few child abuse charges of some kind. Okay, so, I mean, again, I don't understand why that is a controversial thing to say. Clearly, there should be punishments for the mother. Should they be as severe as the punishments for the abortion doctor? For the most part, no. Why do I say for the most part, though? Because when people perform coat hanger abortions, everybody says, well, you're just going to have abortions in the back alleys. Okay. Well, you just performed an abortion, so you should be arrested. You should be charged with that Class A felony that is abortion. Right? There was no doctor in this situation. It was you doing it yourself. And by the way, if you happen to hurt yourself when you do that, sorry, that's really not my problem. I can feel sympathy from you from a human perspective, but from a legal perspective, I have absolutely no sympathy for you at all. Just like I have no sympathy for somebody who gets themselves sick by using needles when they're shooting up heroin, from a legal perspective, right? Once again, from a personal perspective, sure, why not? I can have sympathy. I'm a human being. I care for other human beings. But from a legal perspective, you did that to yourself. Absolutely. And you did that to yourself while doing something that is definitely immoral. So I'm not going to support that. I'm not going to, prop you up with taxpayer money and with the legal ability to kill your children. It's completely ridiculous. So, self-performed abortions, definitely the woman should be charged with the exact same crime as the doctor, in my opinion. This law disagrees, and I think it's not harsh enough as far as that's concerned. And secondly, I do think there should be some sort of punishment, some sort of accessory to murder kind of punishment for women who get abortions. Okay, if it's not going to be as severe as the abortion doctor, fine. But, let's be perfectly clear. I mean, this is the kind of crime that, in my opinion, actually falls under the heinous category, considering we are talking about the most innocent of innocent life. Life that has literally not even had the opportunity to become uninnocent or guilty. Uninnocent, I guess, could technically be grammatically correct, but I'm pretty sure it's not a word. Anyways. And then also, the other thing I disagree with this on is I don't think mental health reasons are a legitimate reason to get an abortion. To be perfectly frank, I don't think that. Maybe to give up the child for adoption, I could certainly see. But to get an abortion, no. Depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, being, antisocial, those are not legitimate reasons for you to get an abortion. If you can't take care of the child from a mental perspective, then give the child to adoption. And when people want to say, oh, well, there's 400,000 kids in the adoption agencies. All right. Well, the solution to a failing adoption system, crazy thought, is not to kill babies. Just like the solution to a bad humane society is not to kill dogs, and the solution to a bad homeless society is not, or a homeless shelter rather, is not to kill the homeless, right? Fix the problem if there is a problem in adoption centers. And by the way, 400,000 is less than half of 900,000. So I think we're improving. All alive. All 400,000 alive. Do we have problems with the adoption agencies? Of course we do. Let's fix them. Let's get together as a community and we'll give in charity. We'll adopt the children. We'll foster the children. We'll do activities with the children. We'll pass laws if we have to, right? At the state level, preferably. But let's not kill children. There's absolutely no reason to go out of your way to kill babies. That doesn't make any sense. Moving on to other Alabama stuff, briefly. Alabama bill would make false rape allegations a crime. Yes, indeed. Alabama is totally knocking it out of the park this May. Alabama bill would make false allegations a crime. This is from MSNBC. The writer of this article is not important, but I'll give their name anyways. Not important because they work for MSNBC, of course. Or will I? The article doesn't seem to be here. One second, friends.
The most radical anti-abortion bill in the country is still making its way through the Alabama state legislature, due to come up for a final vote next week. And last night we showed you the chaos that erupted as the state Senate debated the bill.
All those in favor say aye. Oh, no. Any opposed?
So that's actually not even about... Well, anyways, the point is there's an Alabama bill that would make false rape allegations a crime. People are worried about this because they think it is going to dissuade people from actually coming forward about their attacks. Of course, Rain has had the report for quite some time now that only about 23% of rapes are actually reported, and something like 4% of them, or sorry, 1/4 of them, so 25%. 25% of those reported actually end up resulting in an arrest. And now I think those statistics are definitely a little bit more muddled than Rain lets off, right? For example, I don't think the 23% number is accurate. Quite frankly, I just don't think that you can trust everybody when they're saying that, when 77% of them are saying they were definitely raped and never reported it. I want legal evidence of that. Okay, I'm not willing to accuse anybody of crimes if there's not legal evidence. I kind of believe very strongly in the premise of guilt or innocent, until proven guilty. However, there are people who are saying that this would cause people to charge women if they actually ended up not finding the defendant, the accused rapist, right, guilty. And I sympathize with that, actually, very strongly, because once again, I kind of am a big supporter of the whole innocent until proven guilty thing. So roughly 2 to 10%, depending on which statistics you look at, of rape allegations are false. Roughly 20% of rape allegations actually result in an arrest. So it's give or take somewhere between 2 and 2.5 times. It could be anywhere as high as 10 times, but it's probably closer to in between the 2 and 10%. Probably go with 6% is probably a good number. So a little bit over 3 1/3 times more likely for a woman to get raped than for a woman to falsely accuse of rape. Fine. That's perfectly reasonable. If those statistics are true, I'll take that, right? However, that's not that much of a difference. Okay? And it still does leave about 74% of all of these different quote-unquote rapes that we don't actually have evidence for one way or the other being left completely dudded, legally speaking. What do I mean by that? It means that the initial defendant cannot go to jail because you have not proven him to be a rapist, but it also means the plaintiff and secondary defendant would not go to jail because you can't prove her to have lied. And that is my point here. I like the law. You should definitely make it a crime to falsely accuse somebody of rape. I'd even take it a step further. I think you should take any false accusation of a crime that is proven to be a lie, right? Proven to be false. If it's a false accusation, you should punish that person with the exact same punishment the initial defendant would have received, right? So, in the case of a rape, if it's 3 to 5 years in prison for a rapist, that's what the accused would have got, right? And it turns out that the woman lied about it, and you can prove in a court of law that the woman lied about it, then she should get 3 to 5 years in prison. That would be, in my opinion, an absolutely perfect system, and that actually is from the book of Leviticus, in case you are wondering. Now, for those of you who say, well, separation of church and state, well, just because I got the idea from Leviticus doesn't mean it's a religious law, right? But anyways. But it does need to be stated that you have to prove, just like you have to prove that the rapist is guilty, you have to prove that the woman is guilty when you are accusing her of false allegations. In other words, finding the alleged rapist innocent does not equate to the accuser being guilty, right? You have to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt in a fair trial where she's got her lawyer, where she's got a chance to face her accusers, where she's got a jury of her peers that need to be unanimous, right, etc., that she lied. You can't just say, oh, well, he wasn't proven guilty, because this is a kind of a weird crime. You know what I mean? It's the evidence, unfortunately, disappears very quickly, right? And it has a lot of psychological effects on people, too, that causes them to not report. It's not something that I'm not justifying, by the way. Ladies, please report your crimes. Always. It's the only way we can get more rapists in prison is if you report them, right? Past a certain amount of time, and it's a very, very, very small window, we cannot do anything. So please report your crimes. Come forward. Anybody wants to trash you for it, then, I'm sorry that those people are like that. That's quite terrible, honestly, and I sympathize. But please don't let it dissuade you. Come forward. That is the only way we can go after these people. But nonetheless, going back, right? That is my point, basically, right? I've kind of already made it. You do need to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that the woman actually falsely accused, just like you need to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that the male actually raped. Or, of course, reverse the roles, because it's not like this is technically a gendered crime. It is gender neutral. I mean, it is more likely for men to rape, of course, but it is technically gender neutral, right? Women can do it. But nonetheless, right? So I like a lot about the bill, but I want to make sure that the rule of law is kept. I want to make sure that the innocent are preserved as innocent until they are proven beyond any shadow of a doubt to be guilty. And I want it to be difficult to prove people of crimes, right? Once you are proven of a crime, we should definitely not, baby you. We should have a legal system that means business, for sure. But it should be difficult to prove people of crimes, because you are talking about potentially taking people's life, potentially taking people's property, potentially putting people in debt, taking people's freedoms away, taking people's ability to, not live in a box away. So it should be difficult to prove them of crimes. And I sympathize a lot with people who are saying that, that this bill could potentially be used to dissuade women. And if the bill acknowledges that and legislates around it, making perfectly clear that you have to be proven guilty in order to be charged with this crime, then I would not have any problem with it, right? But nonetheless, let's move on. Got two things we want to talk about, two articles we're going to talk about here in regards to the European Union elections. There were European Union elections here in May 27th, just 2 or 3 days ago. And the Brexit Party actually won a smashing victory. The Brexit Party, for those of you... So, let's back up for real quick. Let's give you guys some context. Brexit, of course, was voted on in 2015, right? And it was, I think, 53%, something like that, of the British population voted to leave the European Union in a referendum that ended up acquiring more votes than any other event in British history, right? Nigel Farage has often stated, and this is true, it was the largest single example of the democratic process in the history of Great Britain. That was supposed to be done by, I believe, March of this year. Theresa May, who became Prime Minister in 2016, was supposed to actually facilitate this Brexit happening, get the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And by this time, by March 2019, I believe was the deadline, we were supposed to have an independent Britain outside of the European Union, leaving that dumpster fire behind, right? This, of course, has not happened. The deadline has been pushed farther back to November of this year, and so we ended up having another European Union Parliament's election, the Parliament for the European Union's election, that Britain was involved in, because they're still involved with the European Union. The Brexit Party was founded by former UKIP party member Nigel Farage, who's pretty much 100% to blame or to thank, depending on what you feel, for the Brexit, right? He was the one who spearheaded the campaign to get the Brexit going. He left the party after the Brexit was voted on, thinking that his job was done. It ended up eventually falling into the hands of Jared Batten. Jared Batten then made decisions that Nigel Farage disagreed with, which we will certainly get into. And then Nigel Farage came back and founded the Brexit Party, number one, as a counter to UKIP, and number two, and most importantly, at least in his own mind, or at least in his own rhetoric, to get the Brexit going, because the Brexit, of course, is not going, and it needs to be going. Deal or no deal, you need to get out of the European Union. It is a dumpster fire. It is tyrannical. Great Britain itself is already, of course, incredibly tyrannical, but it's even more so when you're losing your national sovereignty to a globalist and socialist group like the European Union. So the Brexit Party ended up doing phenomenally well. And the UKIP Party, which Nigel Farage left, actually ended up getting only like 3.6% of the vote. It was very disappointing. Obviously, I'm an American, but my personal favorite party, if I was British, would be UKIP. That's the party I would vote for. And the reason is honestly pretty obvious, right? The main issue going into this European election is Brexit. So when you have the face of Brexit, Nigel Farage, in a party that is called the Brexit Party, that is a single-issue party solely dedicated to achieving the Brexit, right? Of course he's going to win. Of course he's going to win. It's kind of inevitable. You actually heard Sargon of Akkad say things kind of similar to this, in the weeks leading up to the election and directly following the election. Sargon of Akkad, otherwise known as Carl Benjamin, was actually standing for UKIP in the elections for the European Parliament, as was Mark Meechan. And Tommy Robinson attempted, but he ended up having to stand as an independent because UKIP would not allow him to get into the party. More on that in a minute. So there's a few comments I want to make, but let's just go ahead and get into the article so we can give more background here. The European elections 2019 Brexit Party dominates as Tories and Labour suffer. And this is true, actually. The Tories and Labour, which are equivalent to Republicans, that would be Tories, and Democrats, that would be Labour, had less combined than the Brexit Party. So let's just go ahead and read. The Brexit Party was the clear winner in the UK's European elections, while the pro-EU Lib Dems came in second. The Conservative and Labour suffered heavy losses, with the former getting less than 10% of the vote. Yeah, the Labour Party got less than 10% of the vote. It was abominable. Very good for the liberty and preservation of Englishness in Britain, though. Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage said he was ready to take on the main parties in a general election. Mr. Farage's party won 29 seats, the Lib Dems 16, Labour 10, the Greens 7, the Tories 4, the SNP 3, and Plaid Cymru, I think is how you say that, and DUP 1 each. The elections came after Prime Minister Theresa May tried 3 times to secure MPs' backing for her Brexit plan and announced her resignation after her fourth attempt prompted a backlash. Mr. Farage told the BBC, quote, with a big and simple message, which is we've been badly let down by 2 parties who have broken their promises. We have topped the polls in a fairly dramatic style. The 2-party system now serves nothing but itself. I think they are an obstruction to the modernizing of politics. We are going to take them on, end quote. The main points at a glance. The UK elected 73 MEPs, which means members of the European Parliament. Turnout was just below 37%, the second highest in any European election in the UK. The Brexit Party received the highest share of the votes in 9 of the 12 regions and had 32% overall. The Conservative Party, or the Tories, was in 5th place. The Lib Dems came in 2nd with 20% of the vote. The Labour Party fell to 3rd overall with less than 15% of the vote. The Green Party also made gains, seeing its best performance since 1989. The newly formed Change UK did not win any seats, while UKIP hemorrhaged support to the Brexit Party. And this is a huge, huge problem in British politics, in my opinion. We're going to get to that in a second, but I do want to finish this. Anti-Brexit parties, those in favor of another referendum, collectively took up about 40% of the vote, compared to 35% for the Brexit Party and UKIP, both in favor of leaving the EU without a deal. How pro- and anti-Brexit parties have done. Election results grouped by parties on Brexit's stance. Anti-Brexit 40.4%, pro-Brexit 34.9%. And then 9.1 and 14.1% between Conservative and Labour, who are kind of back and forth. Kind of depends on the members. Liberal Democrat leader Sir Vince Cable said he was pleasantly surprised by his party's very good result. He added there was, quote, a majority of people in the country who don't want to leave the European Union now, end quote. Polling expert Sir John Curtis said the results showed how polarized the country had become over Brexit. Were these results an overwhelming cry for us to leave the EU, whatever the cost, or a sign with some slightly convoluted arithmetic that the country now wants another referendum to stop Brexit altogether? Guess what? The situation is not quite so black and white, whatever you will hear in the coming hours about the meaning of these numbers. The Brexit Party's success was significant, and Nigel Farage's new group is the biggest single winner. But the Lib Dems, Greens, Plaid, and SNP, all parties advocating the opposite, were victors as well. Mrs. May, who is due to step down as Conservative leader on June the 7th, tweeted her response to her party's performance. Quote, a very disappointing night for Conservatives. Some excellent MEPs have lost their seats. Some excellent candidates missed out. The Labour have also suffered big losses. It shows the importance of finding a Brexit deal, and I sincerely hope these results focus minds in Parliament. Across Europe, the big center-right and center-left blocs lost ground amid a surge in support for Liberals, Greens, and Nationalists. The UK has been due to leave the EU since March 29th. Yeah, so it wasn't March. But after the deadline was put back to October 31st, sorry, I thought it was November, but it is actually October 31st, participation in the election became mandatory. The Brexit Party topped the polls in every region of England apart from London. It also dominated in Wales, with Plaid Cymru, if that's how you say that, sorry, coming in second. It has now become the joint largest national party in the European Union, alongside Germany's CDU/CSU party, which is Christian Democratic Union. So, there are a few things to note in this situation. Thing number one, clearly the British people want a Brexit, right? That is why the Brexit Party ended up winning out in this election as the most powerful party in the European Parliament for the UK. This is a fact. We know for a fact that they want to get out. We know for a fact that it is causing the Tories some very serious problems. Theresa May has had to resign. Boris Johnson is probably going to be the next prime minister, although he does actually have a court case coming about possible Brexit lies, they've said. I'm not entirely sure what it's about, but I'll definitely report more on it once I know more about what it's about. And this is something that I think Nigel Farage definitely took advantage of in getting himself back into politics. Now, I don't actually think that Nigel Farage is 100% ego-driven in this situation, though I think he is definitely very much driven by his own personal ego. I also think he has done this in order to counter UKIP and Gerard Batten, and I find that to be incredibly problematic because you cannot have your politics focused on one issue, right? You just simply can't. And Nigel Farage, by the way, as much as he would like to convince you that he is against what Gerard Batten and what Carl Benjamin and what Tommy Robinson have said, probably a little bit Carl Benjamin, because Carl Benjamin is actually to the left of Nigel Farage. Fun fact. And that is a fact, okay? He has said that he wanted to get rid of their universal health care system, or at least scale it back. He has said that he wants to re-legalize guns. He has said that he is in favor of free market capitalism. He is in favor of reducing immigration, right? There are tons and tons of things that Nigel Farage has made very clear he supports, that Gerard Batten also supports, that Tommy Robinson also supports. And yet, when people like Tommy Robinson and Sargon of Akkad and Count Dankula and Milo Yiannopoulos and Paul Joseph Watson, right, are given the ability to join UKIP, are given a platform for UKIP, and are endorsing UKIP, what does Nigel Farage do? He completely sabotages them. He completely and utterly destroys the party by forming a one-issue party that, in the minds of most, renders UKIP useless and too controversial to support. Nigel Farage could have led this party into the sunset with brilliant, brilliant members in the European Parliament, like Carl Benjamin, like Marcus Meechan or Count Dankula, like Tommy Robinson, who he honestly should have looked forward to passing UKIP's leadership onto. Tommy Robinson is the perfect candidate to run the United Kingdom right now. And yes, I said that. To run the United Kingdom, he should be the Prime Minister. Do I think he's ever going to get that? Absolutely not. But he is the perfect candidate to run the European Union, because while we can say everything about Marcus Meechan being fined for the whole "mate, your Doug's a Nazi" video, right? And we can say all the stuff about, the possible jail time, small amounts of jail time for Carl Benjamin after his rape joke, right? But Tommy Robinson's life is threatened on a daily by the British and European establishments. Tommy Robinson's life is threatened on a daily for going after, in the streets, where it actually matters, those who are censoring free speech, those who are going after British women, those who are trying to destroy the unique English culture, and will get to the unique Welsh and Scottish cultures that are also members of the United Kingdom. Okay, you just wait for it. It will happen. Mark my words, it will happen. It is a matter of when. Okay? Tommy Robinson is at the forefront of all of this. And Tommy Robinson holds all of the same political views as Nigel Farage, as a conservative would here in America. I'm fairly certain he's even a Christian. So if that's something that's a concern of yours, which is certainly, I understand if it is, I'm pretty sure that he's even, so he's to the right, much like Nigel Farage is, much like Gerard Batten is, although Gerard Batten I don't think is Christian. I don't think that matters, though, as far as the UKIP is concerned. I don't think that's a concern for them up in Britain. Nonetheless, point being, right, this man is the perfect man to lead a Brexit, to get rid of the NAR, which is their system of national health care, to get rid of the nonsense gun regulations and knife regulations and, banning, or not banning, but making you get licenses for TVs, the mass immigration of Muslims, the capitulation to Muslims, right? Carl Benjamin is much too liberal for my taste, as is Marcus Meechan. Gerard Batten is honestly a little bit too, I don't know, like the old establishment, kind of, like the old neocons, you know what I mean? I like Gerard Batten. I like Carl Benjamin and Marcus Meechan, too. But Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage were my favorites. Now it's unfortunately just Tommy, because Nigel Farage has proven that he is treacherous. And mark my words, what Nigel Farage has done here will render the UKIP useless forever. Okay? This was the final opportunity. The pre-Brexit world was the final opportunity to establish a truly conservative, truly interested in freedom, truly interested in preserving British values party in Britain. Was the last chance. And it could have had Batten, and it could have gotten the Tories who were disaffected like Boris Johnson, and it could have gotten a very strong support for freedom of speech, for combating Muslim immigration and making sure that immigrants assimilate, for getting people's rights back, right? But no, Nigel Farage had to go and lead another party, leading to a hemorrhage of support in a party that was rising in support due to the decisions of Gerard Batten, right? It got all the way up to 12% of the polls once, and then with the Brexit party, it started declining again. Why? Because all the people who would support the UKIP party, of course, were going to Brexit. And that's the way it's going to be in the general election as well, when they're actually electing officials for the British Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, and the House of Lords and things like that, right? It's the way it's going to go. You had an opportunity to make UKIP a dominant party, to have a UKIP prime minister, to make sure Britishness the English language, the English culture, the Scottish culture, the Welsh culture, the union of the crowns, free as a sovereign capitalist nation with the right to bear arms, with the right to say what you'd like, all that other kind of stuff. You had an opportunity to do this, but you betrayed UKIP, you betrayed Gerard Batten, you betrayed Tommy Robinson and everybody who advocates for free speech and everybody who advocates for the freedom and self-preservation of the British nation and of the British people and of the unity in the British crown. You, Nigel Farage, have single-handedly destroyed the possibility of ever saving Britain again without some sort of divine intervention. That is my honest-to-God belief. And I don't think you're going to see a recovery from it. I think the time was now. The time was now to use this election, which is practically a joke election, to boost UKIP up so that going to the parliament elections, the British parliament elections, they would have a wave of support and momentum, right? Carl Benjamin seems to be a little bit more optimistic to me. Tommy Robinson seems to be a little bit more optimistic to me. I mean, I just don't see it. I don't see it. I think this was the opportunity, and I think Nigel Farage, rather than playing along, rather than creating a coalition of people who wanted to defend the British nation, he decided that he was going to suit his own ego and his own personal values to create a one-issue party that, once the Brexit is established, will be a completely useless party, but will have already done the damage to UKIP, a party that is not useless, a party that is actually going to defend the rights of the British people. Resounding defeats for Tommy Robinson as UKIP, as UK overwhelmingly rejects far-right in European elections. Now, when they say far-right, note that they mean basic conservatives. In fact, some of the people in UKIP are not even conservative. Like I said, Gerard Batten has a few left-wing ideologies. Carl Benjamin is a liberal. Marcus Meechan is a liberal. Milo Yiannopoulos is a libertarian at best. Paul Joseph Watson's kind of back and forth. He's probably a centrist, right? The only one of these new members who are far-right, and by far right they mean just regular conservative, is actually Tommy Robinson. Robinson says he does not trust the result after running the campaign with no manifesto. What he means by that, by the way, is that he thinks that the fact that they're censoring him everywhere, that he's kicked off of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc., and that the parties and media are doing nothing but slandering him constantly, he thinks that that is the reason why he can't end up getting serious support. I agree with that, and I think it doesn't help at all when other conservatives like Nigel Farage are going out of their way to attack the party he's trying to join and to make people who are in that party, by the way, hesitate to actually make Tommy Robinson a member, as he should be. British voters overwhelmingly rejected the far-right in the EU elections, despite concern of the anger over Brexit, terror fears, and low turnout could gift extremist seats in the European Parliament. I would like anyone to show me one extremist view by Tommy Robinson, Carl Benjamin, Marcus Meechan, Gerard Batten, or anybody else associated with UKIP. Just one. While nationalists were victorious in Italy and France, and populist groups saw gains in other parts of Europe, Tommy Robinson and UKIP suffered dismal results. Robinson lost his $5,000 deposit after receiving just 2% of the vote in northwest England, blaming his removal from social media sites and conspiring media for the defeat, which is completely accurate. You can't run a campaign if you can't talk to the masses. The EDL founder, who could be jailed in a fresh court case because they don't have a concept of double jeopardy over there. The English Defense League founder, who could be jailed in a fresh court case, has been doused with milkshakes with his appearances sparking brawls during a chaotic tour of town centers and housing estates. Robinson, who hails from Luton and claims to have never voted himself, targeted areas with high social deprivation and low political engagement. I'm going to be your MEP, he told the counter-protesters, laughing, I'm going to come knocking on your door when I'm your MEP. His campaign's core slogan urged people to vote for Robinson to take our country back and send them a message they'll never forget. Robinson vigorously portrayed them as Westminster politicians, mainstream media, establishment parties, and elites. And let me tell you, if there is ever an argument to be made for an establishment, it is definitely in Britain. We certainly have an establishment here in the United States of America as well, as members of that establishment, like Tucker Carlson freely admit. But it is bad in Britain. It's practically a classist society. In rallies, he condemned serving politicians as traitors and urged his supporters to wipe the smiles off their faces, adding, our country is disappearing, our culture is disappearing. He's exactly correct. Thousands of people attended his campaign events, but Robinson secured less than 39,000 votes, despite issuing instructions on how to register and get to the polls. A letter on his campaign website claimed he would be representing the working class by cutting immigration, taking back national sovereignty, and fighting to preserve our national identity against Islamification. But Robinson had no manifesto and offered no explanation of how being an MEP for as little as 5 months before Britain leaves the EU would achieve any of his stated aims. And, you know, maybe I'm wrong, and they end up being successful in the more important election of the European Union. I guess we'll wait, but this is the American Cynic Party and the TheCynicogue, right? So I guess you kind of knew what you were getting into. UKIP candidate Carl Benjamin, also known by his YouTube name Sargon of Akkad, was also hit with milkshakes and fish on the campaign trail. His policies were overshadowed by his controversy over rape jokes he directed at Labour MP Jess Phillips, for which he refused to apologize. Mr. Benjamin appeared with right-wing provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos, who has been condemned for his remarks on subjects including feminism, pedophilia, trans people, race, and religion, and has called for journalists to be shot. That's a lie. He failed to win a seat in southwest England, where UKIP won just 3% of the vote. Party leader Gerard Batten lost his own London seat, which he had since 2004, after UKIP plummeted to 7th place in the capital and 9th nationally. Mr. Batten, who is repeatedly called Islam a death cult, which it is, labeled the Prophet Muhammad as a pedophile, which he was, sparked an exodus from UKIP last year over his shift to the far right. That's a lie. That is a lie. Independent is lying to you right now. He took a party that was down at 1% after Nigel Farage left, got it back up to 12%, and then the party started hemorrhaging support after Nigel Farage founded the Brexit Party. Had absolutely nothing with what... In fact, if anything, Gerard Batten asking the far right to join him is probably what was responsible for the the growth by 12 times. He hired Robinson as an advisor on grooming gangs and brought in Mr. Benjamin and fellow YouTuber Mark Meechan, who was prosecuted over a video showing a pug appearing to perform Nazi salutes in response to his slogans, including "Gas the Jews." A wave of resignations culminated in Nigel Farage leaving UKIP in December, going on to create the Brexit Party and effectively wiping out his former group. Despite long-standing accusation that Mr. Farage had capitalized on xenophobia and racism with stunts including the 2016 Breaking Point poster, he cultivated a more moderate image for his new party, which is one of the reasons I think that he is a filthy traitor. Not only the fact that he completely destroyed UKIP's chances, but also the fact that he himself agrees with everything that Tommy Robinson does, and yet he goes out of his way to attack Tommy Robinson and say that he's rightfully arrested. It's complete nonsense. He's accused Mr. Batten of being obsessed with Islam, says, quote, "The brand has now been so damaged so times that it's not able to pick up and won't be able to pick up the political opportunity that is there staring it in the face," end quote. UKIP polled just 3% in the UK, losing all its European Parliament seats just 5 years after topping the polls in 2014. Meanwhile, the Brexit Party, with an array of candidates, including former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, won 32% of the vote and will send 28 EPs to Brussels. Now, we are actually 13 minutes over the hour that we're allotted, so I just want to briefly finish that. I've ranted enough. I just want to point this out because it's ridiculous. We were going to get into this more. But Pope Francis holds up Sweden as model of successful immigration. You can certainly read this article for yourself. I would recommend you do so. It's by Breitbart. Pope Francis said Sweden is a model of good immigration policy and is full of Latin Americans. He obviously thinks immigration is a priority in the world today. Now, this is, of course, absolutely hilarious and just further proves the either evil or outright stupidity of the Grand Blasphemous when you consider the fact that Sweden has the highest rape rate in all of Europe. See here, we are at nationmaster.com. Crime. Violent crime. Rapes per million people. Countries compared. And let's see what we find here. Number 1, South Africa. Number 2, Botswana. Number 3, Lesotho. Number 4, Swaziland. Number 5, Bermuda. Number 6, Sweden. So, a whole bunch of countries that are impoverished, that have ridiculously corrupt politicians, that don't even have streetlights half the time. Bunch of third world countries, and Sweden. One of these things is not like the others, but it definitely belongs here, right? Perfect example of the absolutely fantastic ability of Sweden to assimilate its immigrants. Even though Sweden rape most convicted attackers are foreign-born. About 58%, according to the Swedish National TV channel, or TV broadcasting network, right? 58% are immigrants who were born, about 58% of men convicted in Sweden of rape and attempted rape over the past 5 years were born abroad, right? Perfect example of great immigration. We don't have enough time to get into that, but we'll definitely talk more about it this weekend on Apologetics. Probably on some more episodes of the Watchdog too, although you'll have to go to our Facebook, the American Cynic Party, if you want to like and follow us there, where you can get our live videos that aren't quite as high quality, but are every weekday down there. If you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to the Cynicogue if you like our content. We have at least one episode of the Watchdog every single week. We also have our religious apologetics program on Apologetics every single weekend, and more shows coming forward for you eventually. If you like this, or if you want to get some of the articles for yourself, they will be down in the description below, as will the links to all of our social media accounts, namely C.Jay Cox /ACP Official on Gab, the Cynicogue on Minds, the American Cynic Party, of course, on Facebook, Cynic Thought on Instagram, and Terrestrial Earthbird on Twitter. You can also go ahead and, of course, subscribe here if you like it, and show us any questions, comments, concerns, or criticisms down in the comment section below. Anybody who is respectful will be responded to. We can promise you that. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. We certainly do appreciate it, and have a good rest of your evening.